In the days of the pioneers, there was a prophecy that had great significance to the people of God. Today, this prophecy is hardly even known by Seventh Day Adventists of today, regarding Daniel chapter 11 verse 45 and Daniel chapter 12 verse 1, and its great significance to us living today. Ellen G. White and the early pioneers studied and prayed extensively for light to be revealed about the prophecies contained in the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation. God was with them, and He gave them great light concerning the prophecies that related to the end times. After the Great Disappointment in 1844, great light was shed from heaven regarding the sanctuary, the Sabbath, and prophetic events. All this light from heaven strengthened the people of God and was supposed to be handed down from generation to generation until Christ came to claim us as His own. The sanctuary in particular was of great significance and importance to the people of God, because within it contained a complete system of truth regarding the plan of salvation. The early pioneers understood that there was a deep connection between prophetic events and the sanctuary. "Thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary," was their rallying cry and anchor after it was revealed to them after the Great Disappointment. The history of the sanctuary and its vital connection to the people of God and its deep prophetic message must be clearly understood by us who are now living in these end times. The sanctuary has always been important to the children of God. In the Old Testament times, it teaches us the sacred history accounts of the children of Israel, mighty deliverance from Egypt to Mount Sinai in Arabia, where God would teach them about Himself and the great plan of salvation. In Exodus chapter 25, verses 8 to 10, God tells them the following: "And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show thee, after the pattern of the tabernacle, and the pattern of all the instruments thereof, even so shall ye make it." For thousands of years, the sanctuary and its services was the focus of the children of Israel's worship experience, as it taught them of the promised Redeemer to come. They were always directed to keep their eyes on the sanctuary. In Exodus chapter 33, verses 9 to 10, it taught this historical account. "And it came to pass, as Moses entered into the tabernacle, the cloudy pillar descended and stood at the door of the tabernacle. And the Lord talked with Moses, and all the people saw the cloudy pillar stand at the tabernacle door. And all the people rose up and worshipped, every man in his tent door." The children of Israel were clearly commanded to keep their eyes on the sanctuary through successive generations, and their rallying cry was again Psalm 77 verse 13, "Thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary." But all this was going to change. The earthly sanctuary was going to come to an end. In Daniel chapter 8 verse 14 and Daniel chapter 9 verses 23 to 27, the sanctuary was spoken in prophecy. This time, the earthly sanctuary was going to come to a close in the time of Christ. In Daniel chapter 9 verses 23 to 27, while knowledge about the heavenly sanctuary would increase as Christ was crucified and then resurrected to go back to heaven to commence his priestly work. The people of God were led to look up to the heavenly sanctuary where Christ, the great high priest, was interceding. Prophecy was once again fulfilled. When Jesus ascended to heaven, this was the sign that the first compartment of the heavenly sanctuary was opened. This is clearly explained in Hebrews chapter 8, verses 1 to 2, and it reads, "Now, of the things which we have spoken, this is the sum. We have such a high priest, who is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle, which the Lord pitched, and not man." The people of God were led to look up to the heavenly sanctuary, where Christ, the great high priest, was now interceding. As Christ officiated his intercessory work in the first compartment of the heavenly sanctuary, the holy place, the earthly sanctuary taught that the high priest would move from the first compartment to the second compartment of the sanctuary, the most holy place, to start his final intercessory work. The question that we need to ask then is this: what prophetic event was the event that would close this phase of Christ's work and then open up the second compartment in the most holy place, when Christ would continue his work as the great high priest? During the Millerite movement, the people of God understood that a specific time prophecy was about to expire and reach its fulfillment in the book of Daniel. According to what the Spirit of the Lord showed them, the prophecy contained in Daniel chapter 8 verse 14, "Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed," was imminent. Thousands upon thousands of people worldwide were anticipating that some great event would take place, the second coming of Christ. Sadly, their hopes were dashed, and as the time prophecy expired in October the 22nd, 1844, Christ did not come. This caused a great shaking and a searching of hearts to see where they had gone wrong. The Great Advent movement soon discovered that the time prophecy was correct, but the great event they anticipated, the second coming of Christ, was wrong. They soon discovered the truth about the heavenly sanctuary, and after much Bible study and prayer, came to realize that Christ, our great high priest, had moved from the holy place, the first compartment of the heavenly sanctuary, to the most holy place, the second compartment of the heavenly sanctuary. This happened precisely as outlined in Daniel chapter 8 verse 14 had predicted. So on the 22nd of October 1844, Christ moved from the first compartment to the second compartment to carry on his work as the great high priest. This was the beginning of the investigative judgment, biblically called the Day of Atonement, when every character will be measured by the standard of God's law. This was such a revelation to the people of God that Ellen G. White penned the following: "The subject of the sanctuary was the key which unlocked the mystery of the disappointment, showing that God had led his people in the Great Advent movement. It opened to view a complete system of truth, connected and harmonious, and revealed present duty as it brought to light the position and work of God's people." Again, the Lord was directing his people to keep their eyes on the sanctuary, because as great events were happening here on earth with his people, then it was a sign that something great was happening in heaven. So Christ showed his people the ending of his work in the first compartment, the holy place, and the opening and commencing of his work in the second compartment, the most holy place. So if Christ showed his people the close of his work in the first compartment through prophetic revelations, the questions that we need to ask then is, what prophetic event would mark the close of Christ's work in the most holy place, the second compartment in the heavenly sanctuary, which would then mean the close of human probation for all? In the book of Daniel, it gives us the event when Christ's work in the most holy place, the second compartment within the heavenly sanctuary, would cease. In Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1, it teaches us the following: And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. So, what does it mean when it says Michael stands up? In Daniel chapter 11 and verse 3, we get the answer. And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. This verse confirms the real meaning behind the words stands up. It means to rule, to have great dominion, to do according to his will. This will be the eventual setting up of Christ's kingdom at the end. So we see then that when Michael, which is just another name for Christ, stands up, this will mark the close of his work in the heavenly sanctuary above, and the close of probation for all. Because we cannot see what is actually going on in heaven, Christ has given us an event which will happen on the earth, which will signal the end of his high priest's intercessory work. So this sentence in Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1 gives us a specific time which must be linked to a specific event that happens here on earth that will cause Michael to stand up. So, the question that we need to ask then is this: what time and event is this referring to? Going back one scripture verse to verse 45 of Daniel 11, the very last verse in chapter 11 of the book of Daniel, it tells us the following: And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. So, the time and the event that will cause Michael to stand up, resulting in him closing his role as our high priest in the second compartment of the heavenly sanctuary, is all clearly defined in verse 45 of Daniel 11. This truth is so important that we need to discover who is the he that sparks an event that closes the human probation for all. In Daniel 11 and verse 40, it begins to give us an answer. And at that time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, And the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. So we see that the scriptures of truth identify the he as the king of the north. This verse also begins to give us some other clues on who this he power, who is the king of the north, really is. This he power starts in verse 40 and runs straight through from verse 41 to the climatic events of verse 45. But before we get the identity of who this he power is, who is the king of the north, the question that we need to ask is this: from which geographical location do we call the king of the north? This is important to establish so that we can correctly identify the king of the north power in Daniel chapter 11 from verses 40 to 45. The king of the north power is north from where? When Daniel was being inspired to write the prophecies, Israel, or Jerusalem in particular, was always seen by the Hebrews as the center of the world. This is clearly illustrated in the following scripture verses. In Daniel chapter 6 and verse 10, when Daniel was a captive in Babylon, it teaches us the following as Daniel prayed. Now, when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being opened in his chamber towards Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day, and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. Then, in Zechariah chapter 8 and verse 22, it teaches us this about Jerusalem. Yea, many people and strong nations shall come to seek the Lord of hosts in Jerusalem and to pray before the Lord. And finally, in Zechariah chapter 14 and verse 17, it teaches us the following about Jerusalem. And it shall be, that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain. So we see then that Jerusalem was seen as the center of the world according to the Hebrews. Any geographical area or country that was directly north of Jerusalem would have been considered as the king of the north. Now that we have established where we need to locate the king of the north from, we first need to establish who has always been the king of the south, the country or kingdom that has always been south of Jerusalem. This is important to establish, as you will see later. In Isaiah chapter 30 and verses 1 and 2, and then verses 6 and 7, it gives us the answer. Woe to the rebellious children, saith the Lord, that take counsel, but not of me, and that cover with a covering, but not of my spirit, that they may add sin to sin. And now verse 2, that walk to go down into Egypt, and have not asked at my mouth to strengthen themselves in the strength of Pharaoh, and to trust in the shadow of Egypt. And now verse 6, the burden of the beasts of the south into the land of trouble and anguish. For the Egyptians shall help in vain, and to no purpose. So we see that the land of Egypt has always been south of Israel, where Jerusalem is situated. Although Egypt has been conquered or ruled by successive nations throughout history, Egypt has always retained her name. Whenever other nations ruled over her, she was mainly ruled as a province of other nations, or made to pay tribute to that nation that conquered her. But the most important thing to remember is that Egypt always retained her identity. Going back to the identity of the king of the north now, who was the first king of the north in the time of Daniel? In Jeremiah's time, the prophet Jeremiah was given a prophecy by God regarding the downfall and eventual exile of the children of Israel by a certain powerful northern kingdom. In Jeremiah chapter 1 verses 14 to 15, it begins to tell us who this powerful king of the north power was, and it reads, "Then the Lord said unto me, Out of the north an evil shall break forth upon all the inhabitants of the land. For lo, I will call all the families of the kingdoms of the north, saith the Lord, and they shall come, and they shall set every one his throne at the entering of the gates of Jerusalem, and against all the walls thereof round about, and against all the cities of Judah." Then, in Jeremiah chapter 25 and verse 9, it gives us the identity of this northern power, and it reads, "Behold, I will send and take all the families of the north, saith the Lord, and Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and will bring them against this land, and against the inhabitants thereof, and against all these nations round about, and will utterly destroy them, and make them an astonishment, and a hissing, and a perpetual desolations." And finally, in Daniel chapter 1 and verse 1, we see that Jerusalem was finally conquered, and it reads, "In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem, and besieged it." So, going back to Jeremiah chapter 25 and verse 9, we see that God originally called the kingdom of Babylon the king of the north. Although the kingdom of Babylon was located east of Jerusalem, Babylon's empire covered a vast area and stretched to the northern areas above Jerusalem and controlled those nations or kingdoms that was above Jerusalem. Hence God called Babylon the original king of the north in Jeremiah chapter 25 and verse 9. As with every great empire, it eventually falls away, and this is exactly what happened to Babylon in BC 538. So after the fall of Babylon, which kingdom became the new king of the north? In Daniel chapter 5 and verse 28, the prophet Daniel telling the then king of Babylon Belshazzar the following: "Thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians." So we see that after the fall of Babylon, the kingdoms of the Medes and Persians became the next dominant power on the scene. Over time, this power became a strong empire, with the Persians eventually becoming the dominant power, and took control and expanded all the territory previously controlled by Babylon, including all the areas north of Jerusalem. This meant then that the kingdoms of the Medes and Persians became the next king of the north power and was first ruled by Darius the Mede. And it's from this empire Daniel 11 starts. As Babylon fell, so did this next kingdom fall. So which kingdom became the new king of the north power after the fall of the Persian Empire? In the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar of Babylon, Daniel received a vision concerning two beasts. One was a he-goat, which had a notable horn between his eyes, and the other was a ram. The goat came and destroyed the ram. However, over time, the goat horn became broken, and 4 new ones sprung up towards the 4 winds of heaven. Daniel was very perplexed about this vision, and in Daniel chapter 8 verses 1 to 9 and verses 20 to 21, an angel explains who these beasts represent. In Daniel chapter 8 verse 20 and verse 21, it tells us the following. The ram which thou sawest, having 2 horns, are the kings of Media and Persia. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. So Bible prophecy tells us that Greece became the next dominant power on the scene, led by Alexander the Great, and ruled all the territories that formerly belonged to the Medo-Persian Empire. This history also starts Daniel 11. We also see in Daniel chapter 8 and in Daniel chapter 11 that the great horn that was on the he-goat represented Alexander the Great, and that his kingdom would then be divided into 4 parts and ruled by his generals, Cassandra, Lysimachus, Seleucus, and Ptolemy, with Seleucus and Ptolemy becoming the dominant rulers of the conquered Medo-Persian Empire. It is during the period of this time that the Bible begins to mention the king of the north and the king of the south in Daniel chapter 11 verses 2 to 15. With Seleucus ruling from the northern areas, which was north from Jerusalem, and Ptolemy ruling from the southern area in Egypt, which is south from Jerusalem. Although the previous empires, the Medo-Persian and Babylonian empires, had control over the northern provinces and territories north of Jerusalem, these empires had their governmental seat east of Jerusalem. These kingdoms were one empire and were not divided. This was not the case with the Grecian Empire, which eventually was divided into 4 parts and eventually into 2 dominant kingdoms and ruled independently of each other. Hence the names the King of the North and the King of the South, which were officially declared as such in Daniel chapter 11 verses 2 to 15. The broken up empire of Greece, with its 4 generals, with Seleucus and Ptolemy becoming the dominant powers, ruled from their respective areas. Once again, Seleucus became the sole ruler of the northern areas north of Jerusalem, and Ptolemy ruled his area or kingdoms south of Jerusalem in Egypt and other areas. This is all historical facts. Eventually, the Grecian Empire would fall and give rise to a stronger and more dominant empire. After the fall of the Grecian Empire, the Bible tells us that Rome would become the next superpower on the earth and rule most of the territory formerly held by Greece. In Daniel chapter 11 and verse 20, it gives us a direct clue that Rome would eventually rule the world. Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom, but within few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. Then, in Luke chapter 2 and verse 1, it teaches us the following. And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. So we see that from these Bible verses that the next world power on the scene was the mighty Roman Empire. History tells us that this mighty Roman Empire took over most of the previous territories that was once ruled by Greece. But this time, the Roman Empire expanded its empire to the west and relinquished most of the territories of the east that was once conquered by Alexander the Great. Israel also became a province of the Roman Empire. In Daniel chapter 11, you don't see the terms King of the North or King of the South mentioned for the Roman Empire, because just like the previous kingdoms before her, Medo-Persia and the Babylonian empires, they were ruled as one, with no divisions, unlike the Grecian Empire, who was eventually divided into 4 parts and governed separately. The Roman Empire ruled as one, with her governmental seat located in the western area of her territories. Eventually, as turmoil, political strife and war affected the western areas of the Roman Empire, Rome then moved her governmental seat, located in the west, and moved it to Asia Minor in the eastern portion of her empire. This was done under the guidance and supervision of Constantine in 330 AD. This new governmental capital was then called Constantinople. This move, on the behalf of Rome, would then give rise to the papacy in the West, as Emperor Constantine's nominal conversion to Christianity encouraged a union of church and state. Now viewers, please mark this next statement with care. Constantinople was located in Asia Minor, the east of the Roman Empire, which was territory that was once previously held by one of Alexander the Great's generals, Seleucus, who in Daniel chapter 11 was called the King of the North. Constantinople was located in that area. This knowledge is so important to remember as we now move on to see what happened next to this portion of the Roman Empire. On the 29th of May 1453, Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Turks, and over time the Turkish Empire dominated large swathes of the eastern and western portions of the Roman Empire. Over time, the name of the capital of the eastern portion of Rome, Constantinople, was changed to Istanbul, and the Ottoman Empire became the new King of the North, as it now ruled the area that was once held by the Grecian general Seleucus, including the Seleucian capital, Antioch. Although the once magnificent Turkish Empire is no longer around, modern Turkey is still in control of that area that was once held by the Grecian general Seleucus. Full of history of yesteryears, this power still has a part to play in the prophecies of the future, as we shall all see from the scriptures of truth. God knew that the prophecies contained in Daniel chapter 11 verses 40 to 45 would in the future be misinterpreted and misapplied. So he put a solid prophetic waymark in Daniel chapter 11 verse 40, which would give solid proof that Turkey is the king of the north power that is being spoken of for today. Let's take a look at this by examining Daniel chapter 11 and verse 40. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, with horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. Going back to the very first sentence in this verse, we see that God inspired Daniel to insert a very significant prophetic waymark in this verse, and it tells us, at the time of the end. So we see that at the time of the end, God put a solid prophetic waymark or a time signal to prove that Turkey would be the power that would now be spoken of from verse 40 to verse 45. Let's see how this can be. It is a fact that in Daniel chapter 11, from verses 31 to 35, these verses are talking about the papacy and its role it had in the Dark Ages when it persecuted the people of God. We can know for certainty on this when we begin to examine verses 33 and verse 35, and they say the following. And they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword, and by flame, by captivity, and by spoil many days. This verse is talking about the long period of papal persecution against those who were struggling to maintain truth and instruct their fellow men in the right ways of righteousness. Then, in verse 35, it teaches us the following. And some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them, and to purge, and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. This verse again reveals that this persecuting power, the papacy, would reign until the time of the end, God's prophetic waymark. So the question that we need to ask then is this: what is the time of the end? As Seventh-day Adventists, we know that the time of the end is referring to that portion of papal supremacy that ended in 1798. This power ruled from the western area of Europe for 1,260 years, from 538 AD to 1798, when General Berthier of France entered into Rome and took the Pope captive. This historical fact marked the commencement of the period known as the time of the end. Talking about the same papal power, it teaches us the following in Daniel chapter 7 and verse 26. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and to destroy it unto the end. This verse shows us But this paper power would no longer yield its power that it once had. Now we have come to the time of the end, which definitely marked the end of papal rule in 1798. Let's now look again at Daniel chapter 11 and verse 40. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him. So the scriptures of truth is telling us that at the time of the end, in 1798, some significant event takes place. So, at the time of the end, which is 1798, some type of war would take place south and north of Jerusalem, because the word push is an Old English word that denotes force or to attack. The question that we need to ask then is this: what war transpired north and south of Jerusalem in 1798? It has to be at the time specified and in the area where the king of the north and the king of the south has been identified in the Bible as being north and south of Jerusalem. As we take the Bible as it reads, it states at the time of the end, and therefore cannot be at any time before or after 1798. In the year 1798, the French decided that in order to destroy its arch-rival in the world, Great Britain, it would have to take Egypt so that they could control the eastern trade routes. Napoleon Bonaparte was sent to Egypt to conquer and control it. The Battle of the Pyramids was fought on the 21st of July 1798, where the French defeated the Mamelukes army. Egypt was for a long time a semi-dependent of the Ottoman Empire, and so on September the 2nd, 1798, the Sultan of Turkey, with diplomatic support of the British, declared war against France. This triangular war between Egypt, France and the Ottoman Empire, as being north and south of Jerusalem, lasted until October the 1st, 1801, when preliminaries of peace were signed in London. Daniel chapter 11 verse 40 gives us an overview of the war that broke out between Egypt, France and the Ottoman Empire, while in verses 41 to 43 it gives us more information regarding the various conflicts that broke out between France, Egypt and the Ottoman Empire. Then, in verse 44, it teaches us the following: But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy, and utterly to make away many. War again broke out with the Ottoman Empire and her European allies of France, Britain and Sardinia against the Russian Empire from the north and Persia from the east. This was called in history as the Crimean War of 1853 to 1856. This war was significant because it was one of the first conflicts in which military forces used modern technologies such as explosive naval shells, railways and telegraphs. This war was also one of the first to be documented extensively in written reports and in photographs. Turkey is the he being referred to in Daniel chapter 11 from verses 40 to 45. As we have seen, verses 40 to 44 have all been fulfilled. There is only one more event to transpire in order for Michael to stand up in Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1. And this can be seen in verse 45. And talking about this king of the north power, which the scriptures of truth has identified as the Islamic powerhouse Turkey, it states the following. And he, Turkey, shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. What is so significant about Turkey in this verse that will cause Michael, who is Christ, to stand up in Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1 and cause the close of human probation? Going back to that very same verse, we see three great events that will happen to Turkey, the king of the north power. The first event is this: he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace. What does this actually mean? Well, no need to guess or to speculate, because the scriptures of truth will now give us the answer. Let's start in Exodus chapter 29, verses 43 and verse 46, and it reads, And there I will meet with the children of Israel, and the tabernacle shall be sanctified by my glory. And now verse 46, And they shall know that I am the Lord their God, that brought them forth out of the land of Egypt, that I may dwell among them. I am the Lord their God. So here we are taught that God set up this tabernacle so that he could dwell among his people. This tabernacle was a type of God's earthly governmental seat. Then, in Exodus chapter 40 verse 34, it gives us some more detail about who fills the tabernacle, and it reads, Then a cloud covered the tent of the congregation, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. So we see that it is God's presence that fills his governmental seat, the tabernacle. And finally, in Leviticus chapter 1 and verse 1, it gives us the purpose for the tabernacle, and again it reads, And the Lord called unto Moses, and spake unto him out of the tabernacle of the congregation, saying. So we see that God called Moses to his tabernacle and gave instructions, advice, and orders to Moses from his earthly governmental seat. So we see from the scriptures of truth that the tabernacle is a place where God's governmental seat was placed. In Leviticus chapter 1 and verse 1, it taught us that Moses was given instructions or orders from God, whose presence dwelt in the tabernacle. The word tabernacle really means the place of government. So this means that one day Turkey, this king of the north power, is going to do something with its government. He is going to plant or remove his government somewhere else. But the question is where? Going back to Daniel chapter 11 and verse 45, let's now take a look at the second grand event that Turkey will perform, which will give us the location of where Turkey, this king of the north power, will plant his governmental seat. And he, Turkey, shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. So, in this verse, we have seen that Turkey will one day remove or plant his tabernacle or government to another area. This is the glorious holy mountain. So the question that we need to ask is this: where is the glorious holy mountain? Because Daniel 11 was written by the prophet inspired by God, let's allow Daniel to explain himself on what the glorious holy mountain really is. In Daniel chapter 9 and verse 16, we get the answer, and it reads, O Lord, according to all thy righteousness, I beseech thee, let thine anger and thy fury be turned away from thy city Jerusalem, thy holy mountain, because for our sins and for the iniquities of our fathers, Jerusalem and thy people are become a reproach to all that are about us. So, we are told by the prophet Daniel that Jerusalem is the holy mountain. Then, in Isaiah chapter 66 and verse 20, it confirms this to be the following: And they shall bring all your brethren for an offering unto the Lord, out of all nations upon horses, and in chariots, and in litters, and upon mules, and upon swift beasts, to my holy mountain, Jerusalem, saith the Lord, as the children of Israel bring an offering in a clean vessel into the house of the Lord. And finally, in Zechariah chapter 8 and verse 3, it confirms that Jerusalem is indeed the holy mountain, and it reads, Thus saith the Lord, I am returned unto Zion, and will dwell in the midst of Jerusalem. And Jerusalem shall be called a city of truth, and the mountain of the Lord of hosts, the holy mountain. So we see that this Islamic powerhouse, Turkey, will one day set up its government in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is situated between the Dead Sea and the Mediterranean Seas, as taught in verse 45 of Daniel 11. When Turkey sets up its government in Jerusalem, then this will be the sign for all mankind who will be living at that time that Christ's intercessory work in the heavenly sanctuary has finally come to an end. This action taken on behalf of Turkey will be the event that causes Michael to stand up and the close of human probation for all, as outlined in Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1. This event will then usher in the time of trouble since there was a nation, and brings in the battle of Armageddon, which will involve all nations, and then Christ will come. We have been warned. Turkey is the he being referred to in Daniel chapter 11 verse 45, the king of the north power, which signals to all the closing work of Christ's priestly intercession in the heavenly sanctuary. This event will take place during the Sunday law crisis. This solemn event will bring on the third and final prophetic event that will happen to Turkey in Daniel chapter 11 and verse 45. And it reads, Yet he shall come to his end. Turkey, this Islamic powerhouse, will eventually be destroyed, and no nation shall help him. Let us all take heed to the events that are rapidly happening all around us, so that we shall not be taken unawares. This solemn and profound prophetic teaching about Turkey is not new. In the early years of the Seventh Day Adventist Church, our pioneers studied, believed, and extensively taught this prophecy regarding Turkey. Back then, it was called the Eastern Question. Stephen N. Haskell, in his classic book The Story of Daniel the Prophet, stated the following about Daniel chapter 11 and verse 45. Every eye is centered on that one spot and has been for years. Turkey is known universally as the sick man of the East, and the only reason he does not die is because intoxicants are administered, figuratively speaking, by first one nation, then another. The time will come when he will remove from Constantinople and take up his abode in Palestine, that is, plant his tabernacle between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. Then, A.T. Jones, in his popular book, The Great Nations of Today, related the following concerning Daniel 11 and verse 45. The last verses of Daniel 11 relate to Turkey, which, as the king of the north, with its center at Constantinople, occupies in direct descent the place of the original king of the north in the divisions of the empire of Alexander the Great, as in verses 4 to 15 of Daniel 11. And of this power it is written, He shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. And Uriah Smith, in his classic and popular work, Thoughts on Daniel and the Revelation, the 1897 edition, stated the following. We have now traced the prophecy of the 11th of Daniel down, step by step, and have thus far found events to fulfill all its predictions. It has all been wrought out into history except this last verse, for no power has yet performed the act here described. But it is to be fulfilled, and its fulfillment must be accomplished by that power which has been continuously the subject of the prophecy from the 40th verse down to this 45th verse. If the application to which we have given the preference in passing all these verses is correct, we must look to Turkey to make the move here indicated. So as we see, all believed and said the same thing regarding Daniel chapter 11 verse 45, being Turkey as the king of the north power. Contrary to popular belief, Ellen G. White also believed this prophecy. She emphatically endorsed Uriah Smith's book and everything it contained within it. Please listen carefully to what she said. Those who are preparing to enter the ministry, who desire to become successful students of the prophecies, will find Daniel and the Revelation an invaluable help. They need to understand this book. It speaks of past, present, and future, laying out the path so plainly that none need err therein. The great essential questions which God would have presented to the people are found in Daniel and the Revelation. There is found solid, eternal truth for this time. Everyone needs the light and information it contains. Then, in another written endorsement, she states the following. Everything that can be done should be done to circulate thoughts on Daniel and the Revelation. I know of no other book that can take place of this one. It is God's helping hand. And finally, in the clearest and strongest endorsement yet, Ellen G. White states the following regarding Uriah Smith's classic book. The interest in Daniel and the Revelation is to continue as long as probationary time shall last. God used the author, Uriah Smith, of this book as a channel through which to communicate light to direct minds to the truth. Shall we not appreciate this light, which points us to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, our King? So we clearly see But Ellen G. White promoted and endorsed Uriah Smith's book, even right up till the close of probation. This is significant. Because all the pioneers taught and believed, but the he who was the king of the North power mentioned in Daniel 11:45 is Turkey. The pioneers clearly understood, but Daniel 11 was teaching us to always keep our eyes on the heavenly sanctuary. Again, in his classic work, The Story of Daniel the Prophet, Stephen Haskell teaches us the following. Turkey stands as a national guidepost to the world, but men may know what is going on in the sanctuary above. Then, in his classic book, Thoughts on Daniel and the Revelation, Uriah Smith stated the following concerning the same topic. This movement on the part of Turkey is the signal for the standing up of Michael. When certain great events take place on earth, he has told us what events synchronizing with them occur in heaven. When the king of the north plants the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, our Lord ceases his work as our great high priest, and the probation of the world is finished. In closing then, the book of Daniel, and in particular Daniel chapter 11, is a panoramic view of world history, which teaches us the movings and mercies of God among the nations. But more importantly, Daniel 11 teaches us the event that will signal the close of human probation for all. Thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary.